This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome back to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are so thrilled to be with you. Right, Dylan?
Absolutely. Fist bump.
I knew you'd want a fist bump. Our question today is from a listener named Kevin, and he asks, how do I get my athletes to realize that they have more time to train than what they think?
Kevin, that's a great question. I think this is the most common thing we hear from athletes. I want to do this thing, but I don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before we used to kind of look at it and say, hey, no, you do have time. Make time for it. Wake up earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say, or the classic, like, if it's important to you, you will make up time.
100%. Like your priority, like all this stuff. Go to bed later. Wake up sooner. The classic work hard fallacy of like, yes, you have to work hard, but also if you're an athlete, like you need sleep. So we can't just keep chipping away from sleep until you're down to like 3 hours a night and then expect you to perform at your highest. So we got to change, I think as coaches, as guys, we have to change our mentality of when we hear people say, I don't have time. And instead of saying, yeah, you do, we have to understand that that is not a false reality. Like the perception of not having time, it's real. The better question is, where is your time going? We all have the same amount of time in a day, unless you can manipulate time, which I don't think you can.
No.
But we all have the same amount of hours, the same amount of minutes, the same amount of seconds in a day. How are some people able to do more than other people? It's a question of, is it actually more, or is it more just intentional and directed towards their goal? And that's what we're getting into, is not by saying, you do have time, figure it out, but by saying, do you know where your time is going? Because a lot of people don't know where their time is going. A lot of people will think that they're spending all this time on this thing, but when they sit down and almost go through this audit, they realize, wow, I actually do have more time in the day than what I was perceiving. And wow, like this doesn't serve me, so maybe I shouldn't spend time doing that, and I should spend time doing this other thing.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the podcast episode that we recorded a few months ago, the Living Efficiently podcast. It's a little different, but at the same time, it does still beg that question of like, where is your time going? And are you being efficient with it? Or to put it bluntly, are you wasting your time? And I think a lot of times people, especially people who gravitate towards their cell phones, I include myself in this, like they can waste a lot of time. I can waste a lot of time just by scrolling aimlessly, like on my phone. And so I think like really auditing that as well is very important.
Yeah, and it's become so common, and I won't even say, I guess wasted is a good word. Another word I would say is that you're being robbed of your time. Because you don't understand how much time is going into this thing. It is so common that we actually created this calculator for athletes to start to see how much time is being spent on their phone. And it could be their phone, it could be video games, it could be used for a bunch of different things, but we've just found the athletes that we work with, the common thing that's taking their time without them knowing that it's taking their time is scrolling on social media. To the point that average college athlete will spend about 4.5 hours per day on their cell phone. Which that sounds like a lot in a day, right? Over a week period. But what happens when we start to look at that over a year period, over a 3-year period, over a 5-year period? Well, that 4.5 hours per day in 1 year equates to 68 days spent scrolling on your phone.
68 24-hour days.
68
like not even
24-hour
counting
days.
Like sleep windows.
Right.
Just 24 hours straight.
Yeah, and then when we get to 3 years, that would be 205 days spent scrolling. And when we bring it out to 5 years, that would be 342 days. No, I did not do that math quickly in my head. We use this example so often that the numbers are there. But wow.
Yeah.
like let's just start with a year with 68 days. Imagine Kevin submitted the question, right? I'm assuming
Yes.
he's a coach.
It sounds like he
So
is.
we're just
Yeah.
calling him Coach Kev.
Coach Kev.
Coach Kev. So Coach Kev, imagine sitting down with your athletes and saying, what if I was able to gift you back 68 days, right? That's a little over 2 months. I'm willing to gift you back 68 days, but you only get to have these days if you spend them working towards your goal.
Mhm.
You only get these back if you're intentional with that time. How much closer do you think you would be to your goals if you spent 68 days working towards it with these certain activities?
Right. I kind of think of it as like a red-shirted freshman,
Mm,
right? Like a red-shirted freshman then has 5 years
yeah.
to get to play in college. And if you're looking at the 5 year, like 4.5 hours a day on your phone scrolling, 5 years down the road, that's almost a full year of time that's being robbed of you. And so it's like, what if instead of spending that 4.5 hours a day, which in 5 years is almost an entire year on your phone, like you don't have to be a redshirt freshman,
Right.
right? Like you can use, or you're using that redshirt freshman time intentionally,
Yeah.
like really intentionally, because it's been gifted back to you. Like you said, Coach Kev could tell his athletes.
Right. It's like a whole 4.5 hours. That's almost like a whole nother job. That's like another part-time job that a
Yeah.
person is working. So yeah, you don't have time. Like you are accurate. You do not have time because you're spending 4.5 hours a day scrolling on this little device.
Yeah.
And when we bring that to awareness, the athlete will start to reshape it themselves,
Mhm.
right? But then we do follow this up with reflective questions, right? Because the big question is the time spent on this device helping you excel towards your goal? Because there is a reality, like we're not sitting here saying that like phones are bad or
No.
social media is bad, but is it robbing you of your time? Are you not intentional of what you're doing on this phone? If you're going on there and you're looking at stuff that's supporting your goal, well, then that might be time well spent.
Mhm.
But if you're going on there and you're just going through and just getting all this social manure, like, is that serving you to get towards your goal? And hey, I get it, like the brain dump.
Mhm.
Do you need 4.5 hours of that? Can you, like, if you want to aimlessly scroll, like I get it, can you do it for 10 minutes? Maybe 20 minutes? Versus like going through and just like aimlessly scrolling it again, like all this social manure's out there.
Mhm.
Why is it manure? Because it's still crap, but it's meant to be spread.
Mhm.
And that's why that's social manure. But there are good things on there.
Yeah.
Like I'll go on social for 10 to 20 minutes and I'm very intentional with what I follow and who I follow. And I'll go through and I'll learn. Or it will drive some curiosity that'll allow me to go, hey, let me go do some research on this topic a little bit more because that was interesting. I want to learn more about that.
Mhm.
Versus like, oh, I'm gonna go on here and just like
Yeah, watch
scroll.
funny videos or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So we ask these reflective questions are the time that you spend on there, is that serving you to get you closer to your goal? If no, how can you start to replace that time with a different activity that does get you closer to
Mhm.
that goal? And there's a few other ones in there that are also included in the guide that we put together because we have this calculator and we want you to have it.
Mhm.
So we'll put it in the show notes so that one, you don't have to do the math, like the math
Yeah.
can be done for you, but you go to your phone, you open up settings and you type in screen time, you get your average daily time. You type that in or you input that, and then it will spit out these numbers for you of
Yeah.
how many days per year, how many days in 3 years, how many days in 5 years, how many days in 10 years. So you look at that 10-year number and you start to kind of cringe a little bit of like, wow, this is how much time is going into this. Time is a valuable resource.
Mhm.
And when you see that in a 5-year period, oh my gosh, that's almost a full year I've spent just like scrolling on this thing, you start to look at what you're doing in a day a little bit differently. And sometimes it takes, I think, that drastic, like, hey,
Yeah.
let's zoom this thing out and let's look at 5 years from now of how much time is spent on this. And it's super eye-opening. But the reflective questions are in the guide as well, so that Coach Kevin, you can bring your athlete through this. You can give them the guide and
Mhm.
let them see for themselves that, like, wow, I'm spending so much time here. Yeah, I probably should shift it towards this
Mhm.
other thing a little bit more.
Yeah. I think another helpful tip too, for people who say, yes, this is me. Like, yes, I'm the one wasting or being robbed of my time, like you said. Another helpful tip that I would suggest is have the time of day that you're going to scroll.
Mm,
Like, maybe it's after dinner time and you're like, okay, I know that that is my 20-minute window, and try to discipline yourself to not start scrolling if you're, taking public transportation somewhere. Use that time for something else, or like I know for me in the transitions of if I'm waiting for you to come into the room for a meeting, or if I'm waiting for you to um come into the room for dinner or something like that, like I'll use those like 3, 4, 5 minutes just to like be, I don't know, using them not wisely. That adds up over a day. And so I just recommend like maybe put in your schedule a time that you want to do that, but then limit it to not 4.5 hours, but 20 minutes or whatever.
yeah, I think as a society, we're losing the ability to be bored.
Mm-hmm.
And like that seems like a great thing, right? Like, yeah, who wants to be bored? There's so many benefits in
Yeah.
that happening. I think of when I was playing school sports, like back in high school, and we were going on an away game and we're on the bus. Like we didn't have like we had phones that to get, to text C, you had to hit number two like 4 times
Yeah.
to get it to be C. So we weren't texting. There wasn't social media to scroll on. Guess what we had to do on the bus? We had to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like talk about a team and you wanting them to bond and all these different things that exist now of like team retreats and this that you have an hour and a half drive to go play this team where your team could be sitting there bonding together, but instead everyone's sitting there scrolling and maybe showing each other like, oh, look at this post.
Yeah.
Like, how much is that really bringing these people together?
Mm-hmm.
And I just looking at it, I'm like, man, so much. Like, yes, like have these times to scroll, be intentional of where your time is going, but also like we kind of joked about this before, but there's all these stillness apps and meditation apps
Mm-hmm.
that are literally just recording what you could be doing if you just looked out the window.
Yeah.
Like rain falling down a window. Look out the window of the bus when it's raining out.
Yeah.
Like we've gotten so far away from these things and not allowing ourselves to be bored that
Mm-hmm.
we have these little devices that just kind of can rob us of our time
Mm-hmm.
that we just need to be aware.
Yeah. You want to dive into hope stories?
Yeah. So I'll stick to the theme a little bit because I've also used this time guide calculator for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been interesting to see that even like an hour a day of how many days in a year that accumulates to. So I've been looking at this of like, hey, yeah, I should not be on my phone as often. And there are times that you can be on it for productivity, emails, text,
Mm-hmm.
calling, recording, like all these other things. But how often am I just scrolling on it? And this past weekend was like beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful summery winter day,
So,
meaning that it
such
was
winter.
it was a layer of snow, a layer of ice, and then a layer of snow on top of that, and the sun was out.
Yeah. It was
And
like a real blue sky,
real blue
not
sky.
like clouds, but it was like blue, blue. The sun was shining.
Yeah,
It was
and where we
nice.
live in the winter, when you get a blue sky day in the summer or in the winter, it's magical. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it does not matter what the temperature is. It doesn't matter like what kind of sleet or whatever's coming down. It's like you need to get out in that sunshine
Yeah.
because you don't know when it's going to come back again.
Yeah.
So we took time to just go out and just go play
Mm-hmm.
in the snow and play in the sun. And what I will say is that doing that made me so much more recovered and excited for the next day than any time that I've ever sat there and scrolled on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's just like a lot of times like, well, it's personal preference and that's like a you thing. Like, no, from the athletes that we've worked with, I don't ever remember an athlete saying, wow, that was a really good scroll session. Oh, I feel so much better and ready to go tomorrow because I scrolled.
Yeah.
But when we get back to like being intentional,
Mhm.
playing, working on things that we want to be working on versus things just like this time being robbed from us, that is so much more fruitful.
Mhm.
So that's my hope story, is just when the opportunity comes, get out and play.
Yeah.
Like so many times people are very driven and they have these goals and it's incredible. And they just forget why they love doing the thing in the first place.
Mhm.
So now it also becomes a chore.
Yeah.
I'm like, I gotta go work out, I gotta go recover, I gotta go figure out my nutrition, and then I gotta get ready for practice, and then I gotta go work out again, and I gotta get ready for the next day. It becomes a chore and people forget why they love it. So then that also can lead to heaviness of like, I don't have time. But getting back to playing, getting back to why you love it, it frees you up a bit.
Mm-hmm. My hope story is echoing that, but from like with another point of view, because I was also going to share about our awesome sunny winter day. Being childlike has its benefits, and I think that if, say, our neighbors that don't know us were looking out their windows, they probably thought that we were 20 years younger than what we are playing in the backyard. Like, we built this like not snowman, but we built this like mound of snow and we were just throwing snowballs at it to see if we could hit it from, probably like 50 feet away. And it was fun and it was playful. And I think that there's a gift of being childlike. It's not being childish. Childish is, throwing tantrums. There's an immaturity to it and whatever. But childlike really allows you to be playful, have wonder, have awe, use your imagination, be creative, and really channeling those things. I think, especially as an athlete, like you said, when we get so fixated on the task and the to-do list, although those things are good things, sometimes we lose our childlike joy for the sport that we play. And so going out and playing, for us, it was in the snow, but in general, like going to shoot hoops at a park in the midst of your basketball season, like it's good to get out and enjoy the playful side of the life we get to live.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very much so. And that may seem like it's not related to the perception of time. It very much is.
Yeah.
Like when things become less of a chore and more for enjoyment, the perception of time changes, right? Hold a plank for a minute. It's the longest minute.
Uh-huh.
Whereas go and like do something you really enjoy, like shooting hoops, and a minute goes like that.
Yeah.
So although time is the same, our experience with it is different depending on the activity that we're doing in that frame.
So if you enjoyed this episode, one, we'd love for you to rate our show wherever you're listening, but also head to our show notes and you can get the Get Back Your Time guide. It's free. It's just a gift for you, and we hope that it blesses you.
Math is hard.
Yeah.
Let the technology do it.
Exactly.
Have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful. It's an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.